Hey there, welcome back to our channel. You might be thinking that Jesus taught us to love our enemies, like a moral responsibility or a duty to be good. But guess what? Joel Goldsmith has discovered something way cooler than that. Jesus' teachings aren't actually about morality at all. They're about figuring out the real deal about our own existence and the world around us. Imagine if I told you that loving your enemies isn't just about helping them out. It's actually the most amazing spiritual technology we've ever had. If you listen to Joel's story, you'll see how his teachings can transform everything for you. Joel spent years in the dark looking for this hidden treasure, and now he's using it to change his healing practices forever. You're not trying to be nice to people who hurt you. Instead, you're reaching out to an awareness that sees every battle as only one unified force, a single divine consciousness in action. It's something that was really kept hidden for centuries. Joel found a way to reveal this mystical truth to others, and it has changed everything. People were working with healing, prosperity, inner peace, but they didn't understand what was happening behind the scenes. But with Joel's teachings, they can finally see what's been hiding right in front of their eyes for 2,000 years. This isn't just about positive thinking or talking about negativity. It's finding a spiritual truth that frees you from anything related to human conflict and suffering. Let me show you how. Joel Goldsmith started to transform his healing work with this one simple concept. A woman came to him feeling so scared and frightened by her ex-husband, who was trying to hurt her. She wanted someone to pray for protection from this enemy, so she could get back to a peaceful life. Instead, Joel showed her a way to recognize the reality that she was the one creating the problem she wanted to solve by separating herself from the problem. Healing, prosperity, and inner peace are about discovering that there is only one God presence, one consciousness that knows everything about us and everything in the universe. If you realize that one entity is everything, there's nobody to fight, and there's no problem anymore. Jesus shared this wisdom with us, and he wasn't just talking about nice stuff. He was revealing the truth that has the power to bring us all to a peaceful life. Let me tell you what Joel Goldsmith did with this revelation and how it changed his healing work. There's no second power, no opposing force, no enemy to overcome or defend against. Within 2 weeks, the threat stopped completely. Her ex-husband's behavior transformed without her doing anything external. This is what happens when you apply Jesus' teaching correctly. You're not changing other people through mental manipulation. You're recognizing the truth that dissolves the illusion of separation, and reality rearranges itself to reflect that consciousness. This is practical mysticism at its highest level. Joel Goldsmith called this recognition prayer, and it's the foundation of everything Jesus taught. When Jesus said, "Love your enemies," he was giving you the key to transcending the entire dream of material sense. The word love in mystical Christianity doesn't mean emotional affection. It means recognizing the divine presence as the only identity, the only power, the only reality everywhere without exception. Your enemy exists only in the consciousness that believes in separation and opposing powers. The moment you recognize that consciousness itself is one infinite divine presence, there can be no one against you. There's only God expressing living as all. This recognition doesn't require years of practice. It happens in an instant of spiritual clarity when you stop believing the testimony of material sense. This is why Jesus could face those who crucified him without hatred or fear. He wasn't suppressing his human emotions or acting superhumanly. He was resting in the consciousness that knows only one presence. When you understand this, you possess the most powerful spiritual technology ever given. Every conflict, every attack, every enemy becomes your opportunity to practice this recognition and experience the healing power of divine consciousness. A businessman came to Joel Goldsmith, desperate because a competitor was destroying his company. Through unethical practices, he tried legal action, defensive strategies, and even aggressive counterattacks. Nothing worked. The situation grew worse each month. Joel listened and then asked him one question that changed everything. He said, "Do you believe this person has the power to harm you?" The man insisted, "Yes, absolutely." The competitor had real power and was using it destructively. Joel explained this was the only problem. The moment you give reality to a power opposed to God, you create your own suffering. Jesus taught us to love our enemies because he knew there's no power in the universe except the one divine presence. Your competitor isn't a threatening force. His consciousness appears in form, Joel taught him to practice recognition prayer every time fear arose about the competitor. Instead of seeing a threatening enemy, recognize only God's presence expressing, not trying to change the person's behavior, but resting in the truth that only one power exists. Within 3 months, the competitor's company faced unexpected challenges and stopped the aggressive tactics completely. The businessman's company thrived beyond previous levels. Here's what happened in consciousness that produced those external results. When you perceive an enemy, you energize the appearance of opposition through your belief in two powers. You literally feed the illusion with your consciousness. But when you practice what Jesus taught through Joel's understanding, you withdraw all power from the appearance. You're not fighting anything or defending against anything because you recognize nothing's really there. This seems impossible to the human mind, because we're conditioned to believe material sense testimony. We see threatening people and circumstances and accept them as real powers. But Joel discovered that Jesus was teaching us to see through the illusion completely. Every enemy, every threatening situation, is consciousness appearing as separation. The moment you recognize only one presence, the appearance must dissolve or transform. A woman practiced this with a neighbor who made her life miserable for 3 years. Complaints, harassment, constant conflict. She tried everything human to resolve it. Then she learned Joel's approach to Jesus' teaching. She stopped seeing an enemy and began recognizing only divine consciousness present. Within 6 weeks, the neighbor moved away unexpectedly. Nothing external changed except her consciousness, and reality rearranged itself perfectly. Joel Goldsmith emphasized that this isn't a technique to manipulate people or control outcomes. That's the exact opposite of what Jesus taught. When you try to use spiritual principles to change people or get what you want, you're still operating from a separation consciousness. You still believe in two powers, yours and theirs. True recognition prayer isn't about getting results. It's about resting in truth regardless of appearances. This is where most spiritual students miss the profound depth of Jesus' teaching. They want to love their enemies to make the enemies go away or become friendly. That's still warfare, just disguised as spirituality. Joel taught that real spiritual practice means recognizing that there never was an enemy. There's only one infinite consciousness expressing everywhere. When you rest in that truth without an agenda, healings happen naturally. The paradox is that when you stop trying to change your enemies and simply recognize the truth of one presence, everything transforms. A man practiced this with his critical mother-in-law, who poisoned his marriage for years. He stopped defending, stopped resenting, stopped trying to change her. He simply recognized divine presence as her true identity. Her behavior softened gradually, over months until their relationship became genuinely harmonious and supportive. Joel discovered that Jesus' teaching works because consciousness is the only power and substance of all form and experience. When you believe in enemies, you divide consciousness into opposing forces. That division creates the conflict you experience. But consciousness cannot actually be divided. It's one infinite, indivisible presence. Your recognition. The truth doesn't create it. Recognition simply aligns your awareness with what's already eternally true. This is why loving your enemies produces such dramatic healings. You're not doing something to fix a problem. You're recognizing that the problem never had reality in divine consciousness. The enemy you feared was your own belief in separation made visible. When that belief dissolves in recognition of one presence, the external appearance must reflect your consciousness. This is spiritual law operating at the highest mystical level, Jesus demonstrated. If these consciousness revelations are transforming your understanding of Jesus' teachings, like this video to help others discover Joel Goldsmith's wisdom, subscribe for more mystical Christianity secrets, and comment on which enemy situation you are ready to see with new spiritual eyes right now. Now let me give you the practical technique Joel Goldsmith taught for applying Jesus' principle. When someone appears as your enemy when you feel threatened or attacked, immediately become still within yourself. Don't react from the human sense of defending or fighting back. That only energizes the illusion of two powers. Instead, silently recognize this truth. There's only one consciousness present here. One infinite divine being expressing. You're not declaring this to make it true. You're acknowledging what's already the spiritual reality behind all material appearance. The person before you isn't really separate from you or from God. That's impossible in infinite consciousness. What appears as threatening behavior is consciousness misidentified, consciousness seen through the filter of material sense belief. Your recognition penetrates that illusion. Joel would often say to students, when you see your enemy, remember you're looking at your own consciousness externalized. Not that you cause their behavior through your thoughts, but that all experience exists in and as consciousness. When you recognize only divine consciousness is present, and the appearance of the enemy loses all power. You're not changing the person. You're changing what you perceive them to be at, the level of spiritual identity and reality. Here's a complementary practice. Joel taught that deepens your ability to love enemies as Jesus meant it. Throughout your day, whenever you encounter any person, practice seeing them as consciousness in expression, not their personality, their behavior, their history, their role. See, through all that to the invisible presence that's living as them. This trains you to recognize the one presence everywhere automatically. Start with people you love and admire. That's easier. Practice seeing beyond their form to the divine consciousness expressing as them. Then move to neutral people, strangers you pass. Same practice recognizing only the one presence living being expressing. Finally, practice with difficult people, those who challenge you or seem against you. This systematic approach builds your spiritual capacity gradually. Joel discovered that when this becomes your natural way of perceiving, you literally cannot have enemies. Not because everyone suddenly becomes nice to you, but because you see through the appearance of separation to the truth of one consciousness. A teacher practiced this for 6 months. A colleague who actively sabotaged her work suddenly resigned and moved away. The situation was resolved completely without any human action on her part. Recognition changed everything. Another powerful technique Joel taught involves understanding that your enemy is showing you where you still believe in powers, errors apart from God. Every person who threatens you reveals a place where your consciousness hasn't yet recognized the one presence. This transforms your enemy from a problem to solve into a spiritual teacher, showing you where to deepen your practice and understanding. When someone appears as your enemy, ask yourself this question Joel often posed to students. What power am I giving to this person or situation belongs only to God? Where am I believing in two powers instead of one infinite presence? Your honest answer reveals exactly where you need to practice recognition. The enemy becomes your invitation to spiritual awakening, rather than a problem requiring a human solution. A woman applied this when her sister tried to destroy her reputation through lies. Instead of defending or attacking back, she asked Joel's question. She realized she was giving her sister power to define her, to affect her standing, to damage her life. That power belongs only to divine consciousness. As she practiced recognizing only one presence, her sister's campaign lost all effectiveness. People saw through the lies naturally. Truth revealed itself. Joel also taught a practice he called impersonalization that makes loving enemies practical and accessible. When someone attacks you or threatens you, mentally separate the divine consciousness that's their true identity from the human appearance and behavior. You're not condoning harmful actions. You're recognizing that harmful behavior comes from consciousness identified with material sense, not from their spiritual nature. This allows you to remain unmoved by the attack while still recognizing the divine presence. You see the person's true identity and the false sense simultaneously without confusing them. The false sense has no power because it's not real. Only the divine presence is real and powerful. Your recognition of this dissolves the appearance of the enemy while maintaining absolute clarity about spiritual truth versus material sense testimony. A man whose business partner betrayed him and stole. Clients practiced this technique. He separated the divine consciousness, that was his partner's true self, from the betraying behavior rooted in material sense. He didn't pretend the betrayal didn't happen, but he refused to give the behavior power by recognizing only the one presence as real. His business recovered fully within a year, while his former partner's venture failed unexpectedly and completely. Now let's address the real challenges you'll face when practicing what Jesus taught through Joel's mystical understanding. The biggest obstacle is that your human mind will scream that you're being naive or passive or enabling harmful behavior. Every instinct tells you to defend yourself, fight back, protect yourself from your enemy. This is where most spiritual students abandon the practice before it can work. Joel was clear about this. He said, the human sense will always resist recognizing One presence because it lives in the belief of separation and conflict. Your mind wants to maintain the illusion that you need to defend yourself against opposing powers, but Jesus taught the exact opposite. He said, recognize only one presence and rest in that truth, not as passivity, but as the highest spiritual power available. Here's what helps you persist through this challenge. Remind yourself that you're not ignoring harmful actions or pretending everything's fine. You're recognizing the only power that can actually heal the situation. Human defense and attack only perpetuate conflict. Recognition of one's presence dissolves it. A woman whose ex-husband fought her viciously in court practiced this despite every lawyer advising aggressive counterattacks. The judge ruled unexpectedly in her favor on every issue without her attacking back even once. Another challenge Joel addressed honestly is that sometimes external circumstances continue or even intensify for a period after you begin practicing recognition. This doesn't mean the principle isn't working. It means you're being tested in your commitment to truth regardless of appearance. Material sense screams louder. When you start withdrawing power from it, through spiritual recognition, you must persist through this phase. Joel taught that spiritual healing often follows this pattern. Appearances seem to worsen before they improve because you're bringing the false sense to light to be dissolved. If you return to fighting and defending when circumstances intensify, you energize the illusion again. But if you maintain your recognition that only one divine presence exists despite all appearances, the illusion must finally dissolve completely and permanently. A man practiced this while his company faced bankruptcy from a supplier who deliberately delivered defective materials. Lawsuits failed, negotiations failed. For 3 months, the situation worsened daily. He wanted to abandon spiritual practice and fight aggressively. Instead, he deepened his recognition of one presence. Suddenly, the supplier's company was investigated for fraud. They settled immediately, paid full damages, and his company recovered fully within 6 months. Persistence and truth brought total healing. You'll also face the challenge of other people, judging your spiritual practice as weakness or foolishness. When you refuse to hate your enemies or fight back aggressively, people around you often criticize your approach. They'll tell you you're being taken advantage of or enabling harmful behavior. Joel faced this constantly in his healing practice. He remained unmoved because he knew the truth didn't require popular approval. Remember that Jesus faced the same criticism. People thought he was weak for not fighting his enemies. They judged his teaching as impractical and naive. But he demonstrated that recognition of one's presence carries more power than all human warfare combined. Joel followed his example. When students doubted the approach or others mocked, he simply continued, practicing and demonstrating the healings that resulted from consistent recognition. A woman practicing this with an abusive boss faced constant criticism from coworkers who told her to quit or file complaints. She maintained her recognition practice despite their judgment. Within 4 months, the boss was transferred unexpectedly to another location. She received a promotion under new leadership. The situation was resolved perfectly without her taking any aggressive human action. Truth demonstrated itself despite others' doubts and criticism throughout the process. The deepest challenge Joel 9 identified is your own subtle desire to use this principle to get rid of your enemies, rather than to recognize truth for its own sake. If you practice recognition, hoping your enemy will go away or change or stop threatening you, you're still operating from separation consciousness. You still believe the enemy is real and powerful. True practice means recognizing one's presence because that's the truth, regardless of what happens externally. This requires absolute surrender of human willfulness and agenda. Joel taught that the moment you practice recognition to achieve outcomes, you've lost the spiritual power completely. You're back in the consciousness of two powers, trying to use spiritual truth as a weapon against your enemy. Jesus didn't teach that. He taught pure recognition of divine presence as the only reality with complete indifference to material sense, appearances, and outcomes. If these challenge-breaking insights are helping you practice Jesus' teaching more authentically through Joel Goldsmith's mystical wisdom, like this video, subscribe for advanced spiritual consciousness techniques, and comment on which obstacle you are committed to transcending through recognition of one presence. Now let's explore how Joel integrated this practice into every area of daily life, for advanced transformation. He taught that loving your enemies isn't just for major conflicts. Every moment of irritation, judgment, criticism, or fear is an opportunity to practice recognizing one's presence. The driver who cuts you off, the rude clerk, the family member who annoys you, all are invitations to see beyond appearance to truth. Joel lived this constantly. Students observed that he remained absolutely undisturbed by situations that would upset most people. He wasn't suppressing reactions. He genuinely saw through all appearances to the one consciousness expressing. This consistent practice built such depth in his consciousness that major challenges couldn't shake him. He faced serious threats and attacks during his ministry with complete inner peace because he knew that only one presence exists. A businessman adopted this advanced approach. He practiced recognition with every difficult person and situation throughout each day. Small irritations, major conflicts, business threats, personal attacks, everything became his spiritual practice. After 2 years, his entire life had transformed. Conflicts dissolved, business thrived, relationships deepened. He said the practice became so natural, he couldn't perceive enemies anymore. He saw only consciousness expressing everywhere in infinite variety and forms. Joel also taught an advanced practice of recognizing yourself as the one consciousness. This goes beyond seeing others as a divine presence. You recognize that the you who sees enemies, the you who feels threatened, the you who wants to defend yourself isn't real either. There's only one infinite consciousness appearing as all identities and experiences. This dissolves the entire dynamic of self versus enemy at its root. When you practice this depth, conflicts become impossible. There's no separate self to defend and no separate enemy to fight. There's only consciousness being living, expressing as the infinite variety of forms and experiences. Joel demonstrated this in his most challenging situations. He didn't identify with Joel Goldsmith, the person defending himself. He rested in consciousness itself, which has no enemies because it's the only presence. A woman practiced this when her daughter cut off all contact and spread lies about her to the entire family. Instead of defending herself as the wronged mother, she recognized that both the identity of the wronged mother and the identity of the attacking daughter existed, only in the dream of separation. Only consciousness is real, expressed as all. Within a year, her daughter reached out, apologized, and their relationship healed completely and deeply. Here's an advanced application. Joel taught for collective conflicts and world situations. You can practice this recognition for nations at war, political opponents, and groups in conflict. When you see violence and hatred in the news, recognize only one consciousness present, not to deny the suffering, but to see through the appearance of opposing powers to the truth that dissolves all conflict. At its spiritual root, Joel believed that enough people practicing this consciousness could transform world conflicts not through human action, but through the power of recognition, changing the collective consciousness. He taught students to practice daily recognition of world leaders, enemy nations, and opposing groups. See only the one divine presence expressing everywhere without exception. This is practical mysticism applied to the largest scale imaginable. A group studied this practice together for 3 years, specifically focusing on a regional conflict that seemed unsolvable. They practiced recognizing only one consciousness is present in all parties involved, all nations, all leaders. During those 3 years, unexpected peace negotiations began. Former enemies met surprisingly. Agreements that seemed impossible became reality. The external shifts matched the shift in consciousness practiced by this group consistently over time. Joel's most advanced teaching on loving enemies involves recognizing that even the concept of loving or enemy must dissolve in pure consciousness. When you truly rest in the awareness of one infinite presence, there's no love for them. There's no subject and object, no one doing something to another. There's only consciousness being itself, knowing itself, expressing itself as all that appears to exist. This is what Jesus demonstrated at the highest level. He didn't go around loving enemies as a person loving other people. He lived in the consciousness that knows only oneness, only the infinite I am expressing as all. From that consciousness, the appearance of enemies simply couldn't exist. This is mystical. Christianity is at its absolute peak. Not a teaching to follow, but a consciousness to realize and live from continuously. A minister practiced toward this realization for decades with Joel's guidance. He described the shift as recognizing that the entire drama of self and other, friend and enemy, attacking and defending, existed only in a dream of separation. When he awakened to consciousness itself as all that exists, conflict became literally impossible. Not suppressed or managed, but impossible because the entire dynamic required beliefs that dissolved in spiritual realization. Let me show you what becomes possible when you consistently practice what Jesus taught through Joel's mystical understanding. Your entire relationship with life transforms. You no longer perceive threats because you recognize that only one presence and power exists. This doesn't make you passive or weak. It makes you unshakable because you're resting in truth that cannot be threatened or diminished by any material sense appearance. You develop what Joel called spiritual immunity. Attacks lose all power to disturb you because you see through them completely. You recognize them as consciousness misidentified, nothing more. This allows you to respond with wisdom and clarity rather than reacting from fear and defense. Your responses become more effective because they come from spiritual awareness rather than human panic and protection. A woman who practiced this for 5 years said she couldn't be insulted anymore, not because she developed thick skin or didn't care, but because she recognized that insults existed only in the consciousness that believes in separate vulnerable identities. She knew her true identity as divine consciousness cannot be damaged by words or actions. This recognition freed her completely from the suffering that human sense creates constantly. When you master loving your enemies as Jesus taught, you also discover a profound inner peace that the world cannot give or take away. Joel emphasized that this peace isn't emotional calmness or positive feelings. It's the deep stillness of consciousness recognizing itself as the only presence and power. Nothing external can disturb this peace because it doesn't depend on circumstances or people behaving in certain ways. This peace becomes your permanent foundation regardless of appearances. Wars may rage, people may attack, circumstances may threaten, but you remain centered in the awareness of one divine presence expressing us all. You're not detached or indifferent to suffering. You're established in the truth that heals all suffering at its root. From this consciousness, you can be genuinely helpful rather than adding more fear and conflict to situations. A man described experiencing this peace during his company's bankruptcy and his wife's serious illness simultaneously. Everything that would normally destroy someone's peace happened at once, but he maintained his practice of recognizing one presence. He felt an inexplicable inner stillness throughout the crisis. Both situations were resolved beyond all expectations. His practice of recognition carried him through circumstances that would have devastated him in his former consciousness. Joel taught that when enough people practice what Jesus revealed, the collective consciousness shifts and new possibilities emerge for all humanity. You're not just transforming your personal life through this practice. You're contributing to the spiritual evolution of human consciousness itself. Every time you recognize one presence, instead of reacting from separation consciousness, you add light to the world that benefits. This is why Jesus taught this principle so strongly. He knew that human consciousness, trapped in the belief of opposing powers, creates all suffering and conflict. When individuals awaken to the truth of one infinite presence, that realization ripples through the collective consciousness. You become part of the solution to every conflict by practicing recognition consistently, regardless of appearances or circumstances. Think about your life as your spiritual practice ground. Every enemy, every threat, every attack is consciousness, allowing you to demonstrate what Jesus taught. Will you react from material sense and perpetuate conflict, or will you recognize divine presence and allow truth to heal the situation? Your consistent choice builds spiritual capacity that transforms not just your life, but adds healing power to all of human experience. So here's what happens when you truly understand why Jesus taught love your enemies through Joel Goldsmith's mystical revelation. You discover the most powerful spiritual technology ever given to humanity. You learn to see through all appearances of conflict and threat to the one divine consciousness. That's the only reality. You develop the ability to remain unmoved by material sense testimony because you know the truth that sets you free. Your life transforms from constant defending and fighting to resting in the awareness of one infinite presence. Conflicts dissolve, enemies disappear, threats lose all power, not through your human efforts but through your recognition of spiritual truth. You become living proof that Jesus' teaching works. exactly as he promised when understood and practiced correctly. You demonstrate the consciousness that heals, transforms, and liberates. This isn't theory or philosophy. This is practical mysticism that changes everything when you commit to practicing it consistently, regardless of appearances. You possess the key Jesus gave. Will you use it? Will you recognize one presence today when your enemy appears? Will you rest in truth despite material sense screaming otherwise? Your answer determines your freedom. If your consciousness expanded through these Joel Goldsmith revelations about Jesus' deepest teaching like this video, subscribe for more mystical Christianity wisdom. And comment, I recognize one presence to confirm your commitment to this transformational spiritual practice. Thanks for watching.